Every great society has its creative minds, its true artists. From ancient Greece and Rome through the Renaissance to the world today, we have almost worshipped men and women of great artistic ability. Artists are the individuals who dream our future and create the realities of tomorrow. True, so do engineers and businessmen and visionaries in other fields, but what they create usually revolves around material things. It is the artist who lifts our spirits, makes us laugh and cry, and even shapes the spiritual future of our cultures. It is the artist who makes life. This explains then why artists remain the most cherished of human assets the world over. Unfortunately, in many cases, they are the assets we have lost too soon, losses that have left us poorer. In recent decades, we have all mourned the untimely deaths of great artists who enriched our lives, yet left before their work was done. Great artists of literature, the silver screen, the theater, and the concert stage. Names such as Ernest Hemingway, jazz singer Billie Holiday, Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, Vivian Leigh, Kurt Cobain, Phil Hartman, and many, many more. It would be easy for us to assume that the lives of artists are wild and turbulent, and that for some, the pressures of success bring demands that are just too great to bear. It would also be easy to believe that to be a successful artist, you must be neurotic or have many personal problems. In fact, it's often been said that true artistic genius is just a shade away from insanity. But none of this is true. In this TV edition of Freedom Magazine, we'll explore the hidden influences that have spelled tragedy for a handful of artists that we have all come to know and love. And as any historical review proves, these stories are just the tip of the iceberg. In the early 1900s, Sigmund Freud was promoting the idea that we were all just products of our childhood misfortunes and our sexual hang-ups. Along with this equally unproven theory, which has since been largely discredited, came a new subject, psychoanalysis. And as a result, storefronts in Hollywood were plastered with signs that read, "Psychoanalysis, $5." It seemed that artists were a good target market for this new quick fix. Even though Freud's now dismissed theories were developed while he was an avid user of cocaine, his ideas began to appear in movies and popular songs. Even Fred Astaire played a dancing psychiatrist who fell in love with his patient, played by Ginger Rogers. And helped in many ways by Hollywood, Freudian thought quickly entered the mainstream culture. Unlike in real life, things always worked out all right in the movies, but those movie images fall away very quickly when you see the truth. In real life, psychiatrists and psychologists are known to have the highest incidence of any healthcare practitioners for criminality, including sexual abuse of patients, primarily women and children. The number of criminal prosecutions and license revocations for psychiatrists and psychologists has been on the rise for many years. Let's take a look at a few specific examples of the influence of psychiatry and psychology in Hollywood. Robert Walker, who starred with Judy Garland in the 1944 film The Clock, began drinking heavily after his divorce. After being arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct, he was given the ultimatum to either submit to psychiatric treatment or be fired. After treatment at the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas, and ongoing psychiatric therapy in Los Angeles, Walker was found dead from an overdose of barbiturates prescribed by his psychiatrist, Frederick Hacker. Another notorious psychiatrist, Martin Grotjan, who had emigrated from Germany at the invitation of the Menninger Clinic, founded a training center for analysts called the Institute for Psychoanalytic Medicine of Southern California. Even though he said that actors are almost impossible to treat successfully, he admitted that the reason he set up practice in Hollywood was to treat movie stars and make a lot of money. During the so-called golden age of psychiatry in the cinema, from 1957 to 1963, psychiatrists were portrayed as the authoritative voices of reason, adjustment, and well-being, despite there being no evidence to substantiate this reputation. Psychiatrists featured in many films during this period, and the money kept rolling in. This avalanche of propaganda for the profession was directed toward a very real monetary objective. Research grants for psychiatrists in the U.S. rose 580% between 1957 and 1963 and continued to rise. Over the next 30 years, psychiatric research grants from the National Institute of Mental Health increased a further 873%. There is a lot of money in so-called psychiatric research. And even though the psychiatric industry has yet to prove the medical existence, cause, or cure of any psychiatric illness, our tax dollars, yours and mine, continue to fund them. You see, by legitimizing themselves on the silver screen, psychiatrists popularize the fraudulent notion that drugs, electroshock treatment, and psychosurgery held the secrets to happier living. A drug era was then ushered in, spurred on by Hollywood, and society has yet to recover from it. One of our most endearing Hollywood figures, Marilyn Monroe, had a very promising career as a model, singer, and comedic actress. She was the subject of countless magazine and newspaper articles that spoke of her high-profile personal life, along with her impressive box office clout. At the time, she was arguably the most famous personality in the world. But behind the headlines, the facts of Monroe's life and the tragedy of her final days tell a different story. 7 years earlier, as she neared the height of her career, an acting coach suggested she undergo psychoanalysis to tap her explosive energy. Beginning in 1955, she attended psychoanalytic therapy, and almost immediately the analysis, with its constant questioning of motives and self, began to take its toll. She was quoted as saying, "With my therapy, I'm trying to become an artist and to be true, and sometimes I feel I'm on the verge of craziness. I always have this secret feeling that I'm really a fake or a phony." Marilyn eventually saw a New York psychiatrist who prescribed the powerful barbiturates that she abused until her death. This psychiatrist also tricked her into signing herself into a psychiatric ward, telling her it was for just a physical examination and rest. Instead, she was locked into a padded cell for 2 days, where she pounded the door until her fists were raw and bleeding. In 1960, Marilyn Monroe began seeing the psychiatrist that would drive her even deeper into her own personal hell, Ralph Greenson. His control over her was swift and all-encompassing. He ensured she was maintained on a steady diet of powerful barbiturates and amphetamines. And instead of leading her to a life of independence, he did exactly the opposite by making her entirely dependent on himself. As further evidence of her decline, after starting psychiatry, she made 23 movies during her first 7 years as an actress, only to follow this with just 6 movies in her second 7 years. And ultimately, on August 5th, 1962, after spending 6 hours with her psychiatrist, Monroe was found dead, apparently of an accidental drug overdose.